Brooklyn Independent Television.
Joetta Maue is a visionary artist who works with photography and fibers. Now Maue, whose most recent works include exploring intimacy with embroidery, also teaches yoga, writes a blog, and is a new mommy. What doesn't she do?
I'm Joetta Maue. I classify myself just as an artist. A lot of people say that I'm a fiber artist, but my training is not in that, and so I don't feel like I really fit into that niche. So I just say that I'm an artist that works in large-scale embroidery, and I usually describe my work as painting and drawing with thread. I started embroidering in graduate school. My background is actually as a photographer. As an artist, I think sometimes in the studio you develop these habits and you just keep going back to them so your work doesn't change. So I was kind of unique because I went in having no idea what I wanted to do. And my goal was to figure out what was the next body of work. I started to think about embroidery for conceptual purposes with this idea that in healing there's this slow meditative act and process to embroidery, but also there's the literal suturing. So you're both being violent and stabbing the fabric, and then you're also suturing the fabric back up. I was really more interested in simply as a conceptual tool in my work, but I ended up falling in love. I was totally addicted to the process. I love how portable it is, that I can do it anywhere. During my thesis year, I had to sort of marry this embroidery work that was all text-based at the time and my photography work, which was very narrative. I call them narrative portraits because they're not really portraits of the individual, but they're portraits of the moment the individual is in. And one day it was like, photograph, piece of linen, what if I embroidered the photograph? And it was kind of like once I did that for the first time, I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing for the next 10 years of my life. That's how I kind of fell into it, but it was also very natural for me. My mother is a seamstress, my grandmother crochets. It felt like coming home. Like it felt really natural to be working in fabrics. I was excited to be having like an excuse to be looking at thread. Even though I wasn't technically trained with it, I felt very comfortable manipulating it, and I felt really comfortable with knowing how it responded to me in a way that, other than photography, I had never felt that connection to something. Well, all of my work is on found linens, and so the linen often tells me a little bit of how the work's going to be installed or displayed. There is a lot of my work that isn't traditionally hung, even if it is hung. I've worked on pillowcases a lot because it's a sort of perfect linen to work with when I'm working with issues of intimacy. I'm kind of obsessed with the bed as a space because to me it's a very powerful locale in our life, and it's a really powerful metaphor. Most of us are born there, most of us die there, most of us have our most warm and intimate moments, but that's also where we're sick or dealing with trauma. So it has this really powerful place in our life, and it's often also almost like an overlooked place, which is crazy because we spend so much time there. And then I've also done a large-scale piece that is a life-size sleeping figure. So that piece was exhibited on a bed in a gallery, and it has also been exhibited on a couch, which I actually preferred. I've done pieces on a drape. For me, I'm coming from myself, but the work is really more about the human experience and about human nature and how everyone experiences love. It's not especially unique. So I'm just the catalyst for what I'm making work about, so even though it is personal, I love someone else resonating to it enough that they want to have that exist within their space. For this exhibit, I started to do this work, which I call the Red Thread series. It's inspired by the Chinese myth that you are attached to your soulmate by an invisible red thread, and that no matter what circumstances occur, you're always attached to that person. And so there are, I think 7 pieces, and they are all about myself, my husband, and my son, and the sort of idea that we're attached by that invisible thread. So they're all done in variations of red thread. But for me it was a little bit of a departure from my work because they're very much drawings, so they're sort of a simplified pulling back of my previous work. And then I was simultaneously working on some text work while I was working on this work, and they were exhibited together, so I can show you that work next. So this is my most recent text-based work that I've done, and it was exhibited with the red thread works that I already discussed and it is all love letters that I wrote to my husband. It sort of shows the many sides of the experience of love and why you would write a love letter. All of my other text work was just autobiographical, sort of coming from me, whereas these were all actual cards that my husband happened to save, and I found them, and so they inspired the series. And I also did these all white on white, which is a somewhat newer direction for my text work. So based on the idea of letters, I then decided to do a series of large letters, and you can see how large the handwriting is. The series is all going to be letters to men in my life, and so it will be this sort of idea of the roles that men have played in my life and what I have to say to them at this moment in my life. So it changes based on when I write the letter. And then I wanted to show you one last work, which is the series of work that I'm working on for an exhibition next year. This is the last piece I wanted to share with you, and it is an in-process piece from my large-scale bed-based works. It's a series that I'm calling Sleepers, and it is all based on images of people sleeping. It was inspired by a piece that's on exhibition now at Ann Street Gallery in Newburgh, New York. That's a large bed-sized piece, and it lays on a bed. And I wanted to push the three-dimensionality, so in all of these pieces there's a lot of bedding, draping, literal pillows to referenced pillows. I'm really fascinated by how the sleeping figure sort of is in this liminal space where they both look extremely beautiful and angelic and at peace, but they also can look crucified and death-like at the same time. And so all of the pieces are based on photographs of loved ones of mine. These are my parents, and these pieces are all going to be wall-based pieces. Thanks so much for coming into my studio in Brooklyn, New York. And you can see more of my work and my upcoming exhibitions at joettamaue.com. And you can follow my studio practice and see other contemporary fiber artists featured on my blog, Little Yellow Bird. Thanks so much.
Become a fan on Facebook, like Brooklyn Independent Television.